worked hard to help pass Colorado's ERPO law, both the first, it took two sessions, the first round, and then the second one that added teachers and behavioral health specialists. And we realized that the heavy lifting would actually really begin with implementation. So we've been involved in doing training and public education around um, the appropriate use of extreme risk protection orders. We're currently reaching out to our congregations to identify teachers to take the new training curriculum developed by the Attorney General's office. We are also members of the Attorney General's ERPO training curriculum. So, and I had the opportunity to hear Sergeant Ford at one of those meetings, and we're very proud that Denver is one of the leaders, if not the leader, in terms of filing extreme risk protection orders. And we all understand the importance of it being appropriate. It's a tool you use when other things don't succeed. Sergeant Ford heads the Denver's ERPO unit and has been a police officer for 18 years. And so we wanted to learn more about your experience, what's working, what's not, any suggestions, help you need in the future. And Lieutenant Unser, you please feel free to chime in wherever. We're all ears. We'd like to take about 20 minutes to hear from you and try to leave about 10 minutes for questions. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
So just I guess a quick follow-up question. Nobody really needs to hear what like an ERPO is or anything like that. We're all up to speed on what it is and everything like that, correct? Okay.
That's a good question. Yes,
Okay.
very.
Okay. So yeah, like Elena said, thanks for having me on. I am the sergeant of the Denver Police ERPO unit. Okay. So when you guys helped get the law passed, you should know it went into effect 2020, and the Denver Police Department started petitioning for extreme risk protection orders right away. Okay. It first started under our domestic violence unit. It moved to a domestic violence prevention unit, and now it is its own thing with the ERPO unit. The reason that it kind of started there and then we moved it away from the domestic violence prevention piece is you guys may also be aware that there is laws for domestic violence relinquishment of firearms for about 95-ish plus percent of charges. When you get arrested for domestic violence, you have to relinquish all of your firearms over to the court as part of your bond. So because of the passing of that law, we are less involved in domestic violence and more involved in other areas of gun violence reduction and things like that. So that's why it's kind of moved away from that. I have 3 detectives under me that investigate these for the Denver Police Department. So kind of we get referrals, we call them referrals, like ERPO related investigations or referrals from all sorts of different entities. But by far the number one entity we get ERPO referrals from is our patrol cops doing police reports. That's probably 90% of the referrals we get is from patrol going out to calls and recognizing some sort of danger with firearms and sending a report up to us to be further investigated. Okay. The other 10% are from various things. Some of them come from our other investigative units where they get a case and from our patrol guys, and then they recognize that it wasn't sent over to us and they'll send it over to us. But we also get them from members of the public. We get them from mental health professionals. We've gotten several from hospitals and family members and just various places. Okay. To give you guys a little bit of an idea, the stats are obviously ongoing this year, but last year we did about 240 investigations into these types of ERPO related incidents, and we did about 50 ERPOs. Okay. So we generally only go forward on about 1 in 5 or so cases. Just the Denver Police Department's stance on this and my stance on it, and I believe the lieutenant agrees because this is what we've been doing. But it's kind of it can be kind of invasive, right? You're taking away somebody's rights for a period of up to a year, and then if we continue to renew, it can be longer than that, right? Um, so we do kind of hold it as kind of a last resort. We want to make sure that it's necessary, that it's on the right people, that it accomplishes something, and and that there's not some sort of other better route to go with a case, right? Um, so those are the main reasons that we don't go forward, right? Some examples of that might be if we get a referral on a person that has made threats about, let's say shooting somebody with a firearm or something like that. A lot of these threats anymore come online and social media and things like that. And let's say that somebody did that, and we get information that they're a convicted felon and that they don't currently have firearms. They don't have gun rights and they will never have gun rights. They're a convicted felon, right? So we wouldn't go forward in most of those cases with an extreme risk protection order because they already don't have gun rights. So it doesn't really accomplish anything really too much for us, right? So another example just that comes up quite a bit is like juveniles, right? I mean, now, like as you guys know, in 2024, educators were added to the list. I think you talked about that in the introduction, and the AG's office doing the education, the training for educators and stuff, which we were actually a part of as well. Is One of the things that comes up is people ask about juveniles having access to maybe parents' guns and things like that. Um, there are safe storage, as most of you probably know, there are safe storage gun laws here in Colorado. If that is the issue that, hey, maybe they have access to parents' gun because gun is being left out somewhere. Um, I don't want to say we would never ERPO a juvenile, but you can't ERPO the juvenile and then take the parents' firearms. Okay. So there's actually there's better routes to go with that. So probably the first route we would go is talking to the parents about the requirements of the law and safe storage laws and things like that. And maybe making safety plans with the school and all that sort of stuff. So Denver has not to date, to my knowledge, unless it happened before me and Lieutenant Unser got over there, ERPO to juvenile yet. So, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, it's probably going to happen at some point, just with the amount of juvenile violence we're seeing in our communities and things like that. But it hasn't yet happened. We found other avenues to go about it. So just for various reasons, we may not go forward with ERPOs, right? So, so like I said, I got 3 detectives under me, and one of our, I think, successes as the Denver Police Department is our process. So, somebody who is probably quite a bit smarter than me preceded me and decided, hey, these cases should probably be handled by a detective. The reason that's important is because if we go forward on an ERPO, the minimum time frame that an investigation like that would take is 2 to 3 weeks. Okay, and then obviously some of them stretch out even longer depending on just various factors. Right, that's a lot to ask for a uniformed patrol officer that is also responsible for handling calls. Okay, so the Denver Police Department decided, hey, detectives should handle that, and we got the time and the resources to do that sort of thing. Okay, and then you also, with the same several people handling these cases over and over, we can recognize, the cases that are good to go forward with and not, and we can get a lot more proficient at being able to handle these types of cases and get them through the courts. So with that, we have not lost an ERPO case ever. Okay. Uh,
Oh,
and so that, and if you guys may have pulled these types of stats, law enforcement is generally a lot more successful at petitioning for these things than anybody else. It doesn't necessarily come down to skill. It's just we're very often writing reports and things like that for the court, and we're used to testifying, and we're used to being very specific with our facts and things like that. Whereas, if I go in, if I'm Joe Citizen and I go in and try and get a ERPO on a family member or something like that, I may have never been in court in my entire life. I don't know what forms I'm supposed to fill out. I know very little. So that does unfortunately end up sometimes in them not being very successful in those ventures, right? So I think that's good. We also with the process, it is three detectives, me, and then the lieutenant. And between the five of us, we generally make the final decision whether the Denver Police Department is going to go forward or not. For some reason, we can't agree, or there's some, high profile deal or whatever, it might go further up to chiefs and things like that. But generally, it stops at me or the lieutenant. Um, and then we will fill out, if we decide to go forward, we'll fill out the petition and we send it to our city attorney's office. Okay. The city attorney's office does not have to represent us in these cases, as law enforcement can petition on our own, but they've agreed to do so and represent us in all of these cases. And we have a very good relationship with one particular division of the city attorney's office that handles our cases. So it's generally the same 3 or 4 attorneys who are also very efficient and, I mean, proficient at these types of cases. They go through one courtroom, which is run by one judge. The only time we go through other judges is if she's on vacation or not available for whatever reason. So because of that, you have the same people involved, and we're all used to each other, seeing the same things, and have done this for a bit. So that's one of our successes. And the reason I highlight that is not only, like I told you, have we not lost a case, and we do the most in the state by far, by multiple times. But also, now that this is kind of being a little bit more recognized type of law. What I mean by that is that we're getting more and more law enforcement jurisdictions that are reaching out to us and saying, "Hey, we didn't know if we'd ever do this, but hey, this case came up. How do we do it?" Just in the past month, I've had 2 other agencies reach out to me on how to do one. Um, so it's becoming a little bit more prevalent and a little bit bigger tool for everybody. And one of the big challenges I see from some of these other agencies is, I guess to highlight this challenge, I have to tell you how a normal case works. So normally, if a normal criminal detective gets a case in the Denver Police Department, they send that case to the district attorney's office, who makes the final decision on whether they're going to file charges or not, right? Well, ERPOs don't work like that in Denver, and there's a reason that they don't work like that. We're the petitioner. It's not the city attorney's office. In fact, the city attorney's office cannot petition. Okay, so and the law enforcement agency is the petitioner. Plus, we're the ones that, other than family members, we're probably the ones that deal with the repercussions of this not going forward or whatever the most, right? So I think it's pretty important to keep that decision within that law enforcement agency if the law enforcement agency is going to be the petitioner, right? But what these other jurisdictions are running into at times is they're handling it like a criminal case and sending it to their district attorney's office, or sending it to some other entity that like them has never seen one of these. And some of their cases are getting refused before they're even going in front of a court, if that makes sense. Their district attorney has been telling them, no, I don't think you have it, whatever, things like that. So, so I think our process is pretty efficient in that way. if that makes sense, is that we don't do that. It's not up to, and our city attorneys will tell you they may or may not agree with us 100% of the time on whether to go forward or not. They'll certainly give us their opinion at times. But if they say, well, I don't know if you have enough, and I don't know if you should go forward on this one, and I say, well, we're going forward as the Denver Police Department, they're going to take the case and we're going to go forward. That kind of makes sense. They're just representing us. They're not making a charging decision or anything like that. And this isn't even a criminal case. So I think that's a big success that we have. Another big success in Denver that we found with these ERPOs is, and I didn't even really, to be honest with you, like she said, I've been a cop for 18 years in Denver, and I had never really thought about this until I got to the ERPO unit. There's some holes in criminal law, right? I'll give you guys a quick example, right? So let's just say the Denver Police Department responds to a call of a felony menacing. What that means is you threaten somebody with a deadly weapon. So let's just say in this case that somebody calls in and says, "Hey, this guy pointed a gun at me and threatened to shoot me." Okay, so the cops respond and they contact the victim and they contact the suspect and have the gun and all that sort of stuff. If the victim says, "Well, I don't want to press any criminal charges against the suspect," a lot of times in a lot of agencies, and Denver would be one of them in most cases, if there was no other charges and nothing else, that criminal case would end there. Okay. And so, I mean, probably in the Denver Police Department, we would probably do something else, like put this person in the suspect in the hospital on a mental health hold for being a danger to others and things like that. We would probably do things like that, but eventually they're going to get their gun back, and we know that they're kind of dangerous with that firearm, right?
Mhm.
So sometimes we have some victims that are like, well, I don't really want to jam them up and press criminal charges on them, but I really don't think they should have a gun, and I'd be willing to kind of cooperate in a civil proceeding. So we'll seek pros on those sometimes, right? So that's just an example, but there's several um, instances like that. I guess one other quick one is, if I commit a crime like such as, let's say I live in Denver and I get drunk one night and I walk out in front of my house and I take my gun and I shoot it off into the air 10 times, right? The cops come and they arrest me and they take that firearm. Okay. Well, two things. One, that's going to be a misdemeanor charge. Okay. So after that case is over, if it doesn't result in a permanent protection order or something like that, I'm going to get my gun rights back. Okay. Two, the cops can take that firearm because that's the one that I shot off, but I got 15 other firearms inside my house, that were not used in any sort of crime. So therefore, we can't get a search warrant to get the rest of those guns under criminal law, right? So we found some success in being able to get the rest of the firearms, or deal with something that somebody's going to get a little slap on the wrist from the criminal justice system and walk right out and be able to get their firearm rights back, right? So those are some of the successes we found and some things that I hadn't even thought about before kind of working in this unit and being around this law, right? So um, we also, I kind of mentioned this earlier, we've done the most in the state. I think last year we did 50 or so ERPOs last year, and I want to say the second highest was Boulder, and I think they did about 7. So that's a pretty typical year for both of us. So we do quite a bit more than most other or than every other jurisdiction in the state. So we do provide quite a bit of training and we brought in some outside trainers. We did one with the Attorney General's office. We brought in an outside trainer that's an expert down in Florida, ex-detective down in Florida. If you don't know, Florida has done the most ERPOs in the country, and it's not even close. They do about 3,000 a year, is my understanding. So
Wow.
Colorado did about 100. So that's a big difference. So which is kind of an interesting point when you're talking about politics, right? I mean, right? So yeah, anyway, so those are some of our successes. As far as challenges and things like that, there are some issues with this law. Okay, one thing that people sometimes miss is obviously this law is not the end all save all. It doesn't apply in every situation. It doesn't, handle every um, concern that we might have all the time, right? But it's better than not having it at all, right? But one of our one of our biggest challenges, and I would think this is probably I don't want to speak for every law enforcement agency, but probably the number one challenge is officers doing the correct thing and getting these type of incidents to the correct people that will then handle an ERPO case. Okay. There's two big reasons that that doesn't happen. One of them I think is becoming less prevalent, but was kind of more prevalent when you guys were first working to pass this law. Is law enforcement was like, I don't know about this, right? So there are some police officers out there that still don't know about it or and maybe against it. Okay. So there's some of that. I will tell you from personal experience that has gone down. I believe quite a bit in our agency. I can't speak for every other agency, but I think it's reducing quite a bit. But the second one still remains prevalent, which is so I became a police officer in 2007. None of this law didn't exist. So it was not in my tool belt, right? Then I became a training officer about 7 years later, and I trained new cops, and it was still not in my tool belt, right? Then I was the training sergeant before I got this position, which means I was in charge of all the training officers in downtown Denver. And it was still, even though the law existed, I hadn't used it. I didn't really know too much about it. So it was still not in my toolbox, and a lot of the training officers that I was in charge of, it wasn't in their toolbox either, right? So our recruits, our new police officers, would get like a little hour class or something like that on it in the academy, and that was the first and last that they sometimes heard about this law, right? So it wasn't that they were against it or anything like that. It just wasn't something that they'd ever done. And therefore, they didn't feel super comfortable with it. And they didn't recognize when it was appropriate right in front of their face. So we've tried, between Lieutenant Unser and I, we've tried to narrow that gap quite a bit with training, and we have seen some success with that. And we're trying statewide as well. But there's still that issue, right? Real quick example, there was a sergeant the other day in one of our districts that didn't have the cops send us a case and do the ERPO proceedings because he said, well, they don't have a gun. It was a suicidal person that had made it known that they were going to try and purchase a gun and kill themselves with it. And he's like, well, they don't have a gun. So that doesn't seem like an ERPO thing, right? So, obviously not a huge deal. We eventually got the case a couple of days later and took care of it. But obviously there's still those recognition pieces and training gaps and things like that. And this isn't something, like I said, we had 200 and about 250 cases we investigated last year. Well, if you compare that to like a domestic violence thing where we had about it was something like 6 or 7 thousand domestic violences in the city and county of Denver last year. The police are not handling ERPO cases, ERPO related cases nearly at the level that they're handling some of the other stuff that they handle day to day, right? So there is just a piece of it that they think about it when they get trained on it, and then it kind of falls to the wayside, and we just need to keep up that. So we're working on that, but that is a huge challenge, okay, for us. Um, just a couple more, and then I'll be done talking, and you guys can ask your questions. Um, there is there's some legal issues. Okay, so one of the problems with this law is, well, it was written by legislators, right? So, um, so one of the things they wrote in there is that when law enforcement is the petitioner, that they need to do a search warrant at the same time that they seek a petition for a TERPO or a temporary ERPO, right? Which sounds great to people that have never filed a search warrant in their lives, right? So those are two different things. So I'll give you a quick example to demonstrate this, right? I need probable cause to be able to search somebody's house or car or anything like that, to get a search warrant to search their house or car or property or whatever to find a firearm. In order to have that probable cause, I need to have reason to believe that they have a firearm and that it is in fact in this place, and that I need to be able to articulate that to the court for the court to sign off on a search warrant, right? So let's say we have a person that is on social media saying that they're going to shoot and kill a bunch of people. Okay. Well, depending on how they say it and what they say, I probably have plenty to get a temporary extremist protection order on them. They're threatening to shoot and kill people, right? So I can show some dangers with a firearm. But if they don't, give any information about what guns they might have or where these guns might be, I do not have probable cause to search anything. Okay. So those are two very separate things. Now if we take that same person and they're also posting photos of them standing there with a whole bunch of firearms inside their house, and maybe they're gun safe with 10 guns on it and in it and all that sort of stuff, and talking about where those guns might be, then now we're talking. Now I can get a search warrant and the TERPO at the same time. But there is plenty of times with these cases that we don't have probable cause for a search warrant. And it's kind of a little bit annoying that for the first several of these, we had to convince the court that is just, that law is just, part of the law is just written badly, and therefore we should treat those as two different things. But other jurisdictions have continued to run into that problem. Okay. And a search warrant, depending on the type of search warrant and how detailed it could be, can take several hours to write. And that could be several hours that we're delaying, trying to intervene with somebody that may be dangerous with a firearm, right? That it may or may not be necessary, especially in these cases where they straight up tell you, I don't have a firearm. I'm going to try and go buy one and kill myself with it. Well, I definitely shouldn't be searching their house and things like that. I just need to be able to get that in a timely manner to intervene so that they don't actually get the purchased firearm and carry out their suicide or whatever they're going to do, right? So that's an issue with it. There's several others, but I'm just going to highlight one more for the sake of time. This is a big one for us here in Denver. I think our process is really good, but we have issues with being able to file a petition for a TERPO or an ERPO outside of court hours. Okay. So what happens to explain this a little bit, what happens with like a criminal case? Let's say I have a big emergent criminal case and I need a search warrant in the middle of the night. We have on-call district attorneys and we have on-call judges to be able to cover that. Okay. But just kind of somewhat because of our process in Denver, but it really comes down to a problem with the law. Our judge that runs the probate court is not on call and does not wish to be on call. And that's her choice because she's the judge, right? And then what this would take to be able to grant one of these after hours is for them to have a hearing. Okay. Currently, the statute says they need to have a hearing, but it doesn't specifically grant them the power to have that hearing over the phone. So the court's understanding is then they have to have a full hearing. They have to call in the entire court staff, and it has to be a big thing in the middle of the night after hours. And honestly, that costs a lot of money, and we don't always have that, right? So there are some parts of the law, there are some emergency things that allow courts to have hearings over the phone. the ERPO law doesn't specifically say that, so our court will not have the hearings over the phone. It has to be a full hearing, so they'll only do it during court hours. It can create obvious problems, right? If we have somebody that's dangerous that we need to intervene quickly on, and we've been doing this for quite a few years, and if we're having this problem, I can only imagine other jurisdictions and other courts having this similar issue. Um, some sort of measure to be able to get an emergency quick order or something like that, so that firearms can be temporarily removed, and then you go forward with your full hearing. I think that was kind of the intent of the temporary extremist protection order, but it just doesn't go far enough explaining how a emergency situation will play out. And
Mm.
our court's feedback is if they had a legislative part that said, hey, you can have these hearings over the phone, or this can happen or that can happen in an emergency, that they would be probably willing to do that, right? Because that's what the law says, so they'd have to do that. But as of right now, it doesn't say anything about that. It's just kind of vague as part of that point. So that's a huge challenge for us. So currently in Denver, we can't get an ERPO outside of court hours. We've just had to get creative and figure out other ways to kind of mitigate the risk
Sergeant,
for the time.
so before we lose you and Lieutenant Unser, I if I when I heard you present previously at the AG's, my understanding was that the makeup of your ERPOs that you file were suicides. And there was another police department that said they didn't even feel responsible, didn't feel it was appropriate for them to pursue ERPOs in the case of potential suicides. Can you talk a little bit about to what extent your department is involved in filing ERPOs for suicide prevention and what that's like?
Yeah. Yeah, I was done with pretty much everything else, so that's a good question. Yeah, probably I think probably about 60 or 70% of our cases that we go on are suicidal in
Mhm.
one way or another. They might be suicidal and homicidal, but some of them are just suicidal. And in Denver, we'll do a ERPO on that. Usually, that's actually a lot easier process than somebody that's a danger to others. Just they're usually a little bit less dangerous for us, you know, to
Yeah.
recover firearms and things like that. The petition part is a little bit easier in most cases, but if you get a suicidal person that there's no witnesses to them being suicidal or something, and they won't, I don't know. Sometimes it can be hard if you don't have enough evidence, but yeah, we do it on several of these, and the other police department she's talking about, well, several of them. One of them, it really comes down to a kind of a resource thing. They just don't think they have enough resources to do that. Suicidal party calls have at least tripled, I believe, but from the time that I got on the job to now, it's a big problem. So some of it's resource related, but we see it not only as a life saving measure on the Denver Police Department, which is number one, but two, some of our folks, like I said, are homicidal and suicidal, so they're also a danger to other people. And some of our suicidal folks are just because of how they decide to kill themselves and where they decide to try and kill themselves are a danger to others. Like if I'm in an apartment building and I hesitate at the last moment, we've had people shoot rounds off into other apartments and apartment buildings, things like that.
Mhm.
So we see it as that, and then we've had plenty of people that are suicidal at the time, only suicidal, but later on down the road become a problem for us and are now threatening other people. And if we can intervene at this point, we might not only save their life, but maybe potential victims for them down the road. So that's our take on it.
Yes, I have a question, and Sergeant Ford, it's good to see you here. You and I spoke several months ago,
Yep.
and I'm a retired psychiatrist. And it seems to me that some of the loopholes that you're describing in felony menacing and the timing of search warrants, et cetera, um, would involve really switching to a patrol officer using the involuntary hold and treat in a given crisis situation. And I wonder if you could address that in terms of when an officer may find it impossible to do an ERPO petition, but then has to switch gears and take someone into a certified mental health facility for involuntary hold.
Okay. Yeah, so in Denver, we don't really have our street cops make the final decisions on whether an ERPO will be petitioned for or not. I want to make it as easy and painless for them as possible and get them going to the next 911 call, just to be honest with you, right? So I tell them very plain and simple, decide whether you think somebody may be dangerous with a firearm. And if the answer to that question is yes, then whatever report you end up doing on that call or whatever piece of paperwork you end up doing on that call, I want you to send it to me and we will make the determination on that. But it is solely their job to intervene with what is the problem right now, which often, I mean, I would say probably 70% plus of our cases, the person is in the hospital. Sometimes they're in jail, but I'll just talk about the hospital ones. Is in the hospital on that mental health hold. Some of them are involuntary, some of them are voluntary. It just kind of depends on their cooperation. I when I was on the street, I always did it as like a M1, a mental health hold, involuntary if I had enough. But our cops generally, our general practice in Denver is if the person goes voluntary, sometimes they don't put that hold on them, things like that. So it just kind of depends on the officer. But we do very much in our trainings tell them that they need to take care of the immediate concerns, which could be guns if there are guns present, and are definitely the person, if whether them being suicidal, homicidal, danger to other people, and if they can articulate enough, they put them in the hospital on a mental health hold frequently. And then as far as where they go from there, we'll see plenty of times where the hospital then sends them to, longer term, mental health care and things like that. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit.
Yes, thank you.
Joan, let's take
Beth?
about two or three and then okay.
One of the things that you started, and I'd like to see if you could walk us through the petition, the process. You said that the officer makes a petition and it goes to the city attorney's office, and I then assumed was not what you said, that the city attorney's office takes it to a judge. Can you elaborate a little on this process, just so that we know what the usual procedure is?
Yeah, I apologize. So yeah, that'll come from a detective. They'll do the petition. They usually they'll send it to me, and Lieutenant Unser will approve it. It goes to the city attorney's office, who then files it with the court. We could file it directly with the court. Like I said, the city attorney's office has just made the agreement to represent us, so they file it with the court. And ask about when the court is available for a hearing. In Denver, we always go for the temporary extreme risk protection order prior to the full extreme risk protection order. The main reason for that is in the temporary one, we do like a virtual hearing, which it's just us, the city attorney's office, and the judge, and that gives us the kind of element of surprise, if you will, in a lot of our cases, right? If this person is threatening to commit mass murder, I don't want them to know we're coming, right? Does that make sense?
Okay.
So we always go for the temporary one. So the city attorney's office files it with the court. The court has 48 hours to set that hearing. Okay. But usually our court's pretty good. They'll usually set it that day if they have enough time. And we do a little virtual hearing. It usually takes about 15-20 minutes, and the judge rules on it. And then we'll get the full service packet. And if there is a search warrant in that case, they also will look at our search warrant and approve that. We'll get that back, and then we go and serve the person, serve the search warrant if we have a search warrant, and automatically a hearing will be set in the next 14 days for the full ERPO. And so that person, as part of the service, they'll be told about when their hearing is. The state appoints them an attorney, so the court gets a hold of the state appointed attorneys and lets them know. And then the attorney reaches out to them and represents them. And then if they decide to agree to the order, they agree to the order. They follow the correct file the correct paperwork with the court, and the order goes into effect. If they decide to fight the order, then the hearing happens. They can also continue the hearing too, but the hearing happens, and then it's a full-blown in-person hearing. We call witnesses. They have their attorney. We have our attorneys, and we go have a full hearing, and the judge rules on it that way. So that is the process.
Thank you.
One more question here. I want to be okay, Susie. So, an average citizen has a concern about someone with a firearm. It's complicated to file an ERPO and get it approved.
Right.
Can they reach out to your office, to the local police district, say, I'm concerned, I don't know what to do? Is that kind of how you get some of your referrals from your patrol officers?
Yes. In fact, frequently that happens. So yeah, in Denver, our number one thing that we tell citizens or whatever, obviously they, if they're one of these qualifying petitioners, they can go down to the court and do it themselves. And I can't prevent them from doing that if that's what they want to do. But we would love it if they go through us. So the first thing I tell them is call 911 or the Denver non-emergency number and get patrol over there to take your report or to take care of immediate concerns. And then if we also give them the option, Denver Police ERPO unit has a hotline. We give that number out. I don't give that as the first option because we answer that when we're in the office and, during our business hours, right? So, a lot of these happen outside of our hours and things like that, right? So patrol works 24/7, and that's the best way to get a hold of them. The only unfortunate part about it, I can't speak for every jurisdiction in the state. That's what I recommend for people, but we all know there's some jurisdictions out there that would be like, what? That doesn't sound like a police problem, or you can go to the court yourself. There is also, if you guys haven't heard of it, Kayak has a
yeah, we have. Yeah.
Okay. It's getting better. It was not good at first. It is getting better. So they're starting to kind of learn and send things to the right people in the right places. But obviously it's a big state with lots of jurisdictions, and they're trying to figure that out. So but yeah, I've gotten plenty of calls on our hotline and through our dispatch center and from our patrol guys. And we've told plenty of people, how to kind of go about it. But we love it if they go through us. It's a benefit to us if they go through us because we have a lot more time to figure out what the dangers are and how to best safely navigate it, right? So
because once somebody files a petition, you have a limited amount of time it has to be heard pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, so once they file a petition on their own, the court has 48 hours to hear it.
Right.
Our court is pretty good about letting us know when a citizen files a petition, but sometimes they don't. And so we may have a couple more days on top of that, but once it's granted, we have 5 days to serve it. And some of these petitions, I'm sure, I don't know if you guys have had an opportunity to see any citizen petitions, but some of them don't have a lot of information in there, and it makes it puts us behind the 8 ball, and it puts us in kind of an unsafe spot. So we don't we'll do it obviously, but we would rather them go through us if possible. So
Sergeant Ford, the last big question is we want to support your work. And one thing that we initially were trying to do a lot of public education would help the thinking being that the family member could file. And I think it's fair to say we, at this point, we really feel that getting the professional help of a police department is probably ideal. And so have you developed, do you have any public information about what just that we could share? That's your language about what to do if you're worried about something and someone and who to call or contact, that kind of information. That's one thing. And the other thing is we could help disseminate that information, but we also have a very strong legislative arm that works with the Colorado Coalition Against Gun Violence, which has been extremely successful in getting gun safety bills passed. With this caveat, they're very nervous always about touching the ERPO law, because when you start amending, other changes can occur that were not desirable. But those are the kind of some of the ways that we could support your work. So if you could let us know that before we have to, shut down for today. But I'd love to know that.
Yes, I'll have to talk to Lieutenant Unser a little bit more, but I think that I know we put out we created and put out a flyer that we put
Okay.
in all of our district stations for the public use. It
Great.
talks, I mean, some of it is stuff you guys already know, what is an ERPO and things like that, but I think the general citizen doesn't always know. I talk to tons of people that don't know. So it's got some of that, and then it's got recommendations and tons of resources about who to reach out to. And it does have our recommendation on there to reach out to your local law enforcement as our first recommendation. And then, obviously after that, you can go through the court, and it also has links on there for where they can get the paperwork, petitions and things like that. So I believe that we wouldn't have any problem sharing that with you guys. I'll double check with the lieutenant when we're off here, but I don't think he'll have any problem with that since we put it out to the public anyway. So we'll see if we can send you a copy of that. As far as legislatively, I personally have some problems with the law that I shared with you guys, and we've had some struggles and things like that. I know our city attorney's office has a few, my detectives have a few, probably Lieutenant Unser has a few. We could probably give you, 12 pages of recommendations, but I think it's probably going to have, for us, it's going to have to come, it's going to have to be approved and things like that for us to,
Of course.
for the Denver Police Department to send you, hey, this is what we think is wrong with the law. But yeah, we are trying to work on some things. I think there are some improvements that could be made. So I guess I'll have to get back to you on that one, but I do think there's some improvements, but I also get it that once you start amending things and politicians get involved, who knows where this goes, right? So yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough. And for anyone who didn't get their question answered today, can you send it to me? And Sergeant Ford, would you be willing to answer a question that we didn't get to today?
Sure.
And we just want you to know we're here to improve this process because we share your belief that it's a life-saving tool when used appropriately, and would like to see. We have the sense that it's not used as frequently as it needs to be. And I think all of us think about the King Super Shooter, who was the family observed the problems, but we're very isolated family, and what we can do to connect families who are concerned about family members with their local police departments so we can stop these things in advance. So thank you so much I think everyone would agree it was an excellent presentation, and we really appreciate having you and Lieutenant Unser and the great work that you're doing in Denver. So just think of us as here to support that effort. And folks, we won't see you again to the new year. I think it